I used to work night shifts at a gas station off a rural highway in northern Indiana. It was one of those places you'd miss if you blinked. We didn't get many customers after midnight, mostly truckers or the occasional local too drunk to go home. I liked the quiet, but this one night, something happened that made me quit the job 2 days later. I've never told anyone the full story until now. It was around 2 in the morning. I was behind the counter, restocking cigarette cartons, when I heard the front door chime. I looked up, expecting the usual, maybe a tired traveler or someone looking for coffee. Instead, this guy walks in, barefoot, wearing only a pair of dirty jeans and a hoodie, no shirt, no shoes, and he was soaked, like he'd walked through a storm. But it hadn't rained in days. His eyes were what got me, wide, bloodshot, and twitching like he hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't say anything, just stood there for a few seconds, dripping water onto the floor, staring straight at me. I asked if he was all right, and he tilted his head, almost like he didn't understand English. I started to get this feeling in my gut, like every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there. But I was stuck behind the counter, alone. I glanced down, slowly reaching for the panic button under the register. That's when he spoke. "You seen her?" he asked. I paused. "Seen who?" He looked around the store, then back at me. "She's following me. You'd know if you'd seen her. She's tall, pale, smiles too wide." His voice was completely flat, like he was describing the weather. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it onto the counter and just stood there, staring at me. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch of a woman, thin face, black hair, long neck, and the widest mouth I've ever seen. Her eyes were just 2 black holes. I could tell whoever drew it had done so in a panic, lines shaking, smudged, like he'd redrawn parts over and over. She whispers to me, says my name. "I think she was in my room last night," he said. I didn't know what to say. I asked if he needed help, or if I should call someone. That's when he backed away, still looking at me, and said, "You'll see her too. Just don't listen when she starts whispering. That's how she gets in." Then he turned and walked out into the dark. I watched him disappear into the trees, across the road. I called the police right after. They said they'd send someone to check the area, but I never found out what happened to him. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him into the store, like he'd dragged something invisible in with him. That whole night, I kept hearing noises, soft tapping on the windows, like fingernails, a weird scraping sound from the ceiling, like something was crawling just above the tiles. I even checked the bathroom 3 times, because I swore I heard breathing in there. But the worst part came 2 nights later. It was my last shift before I quit. Around 3 a.m., I was standing behind the counter again, watching the security cameras. One of them, the one that faced the side alley, started glitching, static, lines across the screen. I tapped the monitor, but then the image came back. There was a woman standing in the alley, same long black hair, thin frame, just barely visible in the shadows. Her mouth was open, but I couldn't tell if she was smiling or just standing there with her jaw slack. The second I saw her, the camera cut to static again. I ran to the back door and locked it. Then I checked the front. Nothing. She was gone. But when I came back to the counter, the sketch the guy had given me, it was sitting on the floor next to my chair. I know I had thrown it away. I remember doing it. I didn't finish that shift. I left everything, register open, lights on, and walked out. I drove straight home, called my boss the next morning, and told him I couldn't come back. I didn't give him a reason. I've only ever told this story to 2 people. I don't like talking about it, mostly because I'm still not sure what I saw, and I don't think I ever want to know the full answer. This happened in the fall of 2016. I was 25, working in forestry services out in Oregon, and part of my job included checking trail cameras and inspecting tree health deep in public parkland. It was a quiet gig, a lot of hiking, a lot of alone time. One afternoon, I hiked about 5 miles into a lesser-used path that ran through an old-growth section of forest, towering pines, heavy moss, that kind of thing. The kind of place that doesn't feel real. I checked the first camera, swapped the SD card, marked my log, and moved on. About 30 minutes later, I heard something strange. It was this high-pitched, breathy whistle. Just 2 notes, rising and falling. I stopped. I thought maybe it was another hiker, but it sounded off. Too sharp, too rhythmic. It would repeat every 20 seconds or so. I called out, "Hey, anyone there?" Silence. Then it whistled again. I don't know why, but I started walking toward it. I should have just kept going, but something about it felt like it was trying to get me to follow. The further I went, the more unnatural everything started to feel. The birds were gone, the trees felt wrong, like they were watching. Then I found something. There was a clearing, and in the center of it, a tent. It looked ancient, faded canvas, half collapsed, covered in moss. I could see rusted poles, rotted fabric, and gear, like someone had been camping there, maybe years ago. That's when the whistling stopped. I stepped closer to the tent, and I noticed something that still makes my blood run cold. There were no footprints, no trails in or out of the clearing. The moss was undisturbed, like the tent had just dropped out of the sky. I pulled back the flap of the tent. Nothing inside, just damp earth, and this overwhelming stench of rot. And then I heard it, right behind me, that whistle, but this time, it was loud, right in my ear. 2 notes, cold air on my neck. I turned around, and no one was there. I spun in circles, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever it was, but the woods were still, dead quiet. I turned back to the tent, and it was gone. I swear to you, it just wasn't there anymore. The whole clearing was empty. No tent, no gear, nothing, just moss and trees. I started running. I don't even remember how long I ran for, or what direction. I didn't care. My brain just screamed one thing: get out, now. I finally stumbled onto a service road, nearly collapsed from exhaustion, and sat there until a truck came by an hour later. That night, I pulled the trail camera footage. I needed to see if I'd lost it. The footage was normal, until the last 30 seconds. You can see me walking off into the woods, checking my watch, looking confused. Then, clear as day, a figure appears behind me, tall, thin, no detail, just a shape, and it's whistling. You can hear it on the audio. 2 notes. I still have that clip saved. I don't know why I keep it. Maybe to prove it to myself. I haven't gone back into those woods since. I quit that job a few weeks later, moved across the state. Sometimes though, when it gets real quiet at night, I swear I can hear it again. Just those 2 little notes, rising and falling. I was traveling through West Virginia last fall. I had just accepted a freelance gig that required me to drive from Michigan to North Carolina in 3 days. It wasn't a glamorous job, photographing abandoned rural properties for a real estate investor, but it paid well enough to justify the trip. I figured I'd take my time, see a little of the countryside, and stop at a few places along the way. I was used to long drives, but that day had been especially draining. Heavy rain, winding back roads, and spotty cell service made for a stressful evening. By the time I hit Charleston, I was wiped. I pulled off the interstate and looked for the first cheap place to crash. I found an old econo lodge just outside of town. It looked run down, but passable. The neon sign flickered in the drizzle, casting red light across a mostly empty parking lot. I didn't care about reviews or star ratings at that point. I just needed a bed and a door that locked. It was close to 10:30 p.m. when I walked into the lobby. The woman at the front desk looked startled when the door chimed. She must have been dozing off, or just not expecting any more guests. She was probably in her late 40s, with dark circles under her eyes and hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She didn't say much at first, just took my ID and credit card and started tapping at the computer. But something about her felt off. She kept glancing at the old grandfather clock behind her. Every minute or so she'd glance at it, then at the door, as if she were waiting for something or someone. When she handed me my room key, she leaned in a little and lowered her voice. "Stay in your room after dark," she said. I blinked. What? She just repeated it. "Don't go wandering around. Stay in your room." I gave a nervous chuckle. "All right. Is this some kind of local legend thing?" She didn't laugh. In fact, her expression didn't change at all. She just handed me the key and looked away. I should have asked more questions, but I was too tired to care. I grabbed my overnight bag and made my way up to the second floor. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet cleaner. My room was 208, down at the far end, near a dim emergency exit light. The room itself was better than I expected. Clean sheets, working TV, even a half-decent water pressure in the shower. I took a quick rinse, got into bed, and started flipping through channels just to wind down. Outside, the rain was coming down harder, tapping against the window in steady rhythms. Around midnight, just as I was starting to doze off, I heard footsteps in the hallway, not just walking, pacing, back and forth, slow, methodical, heavy boots dragging slightly on the carpet with each step. I sat up and listened for a minute. It was odd, sure, but I figured maybe it was another guest, maybe someone with insomnia, trying to stretch their legs. But it didn't stop. 15 minutes later, it was still going. 30 minutes, still pacing. It never moved further away, never closer, just that same steady back and forth outside my door. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over and looked through the peephole. Nothing, just an empty hallway. I cracked the door open, still no one. I even stepped out for a second, barefoot on the damp carpet. The lights buzzed overhead, no movement, no sound. But the moment I closed the door and latched it again, the pacing resumed. At that point, I was fully creeped out. I turned the TV back on, just for some background noise, and climbed back into bed, keeping the covers pulled up high. Then at 3:17 a.m., I remember the time exactly. I was jolted awake by the sound of my doorknob rattling. Someone was trying to get in. It wasn't just jiggling, either. It was turning, forcefully, like someone had a key, but couldn't quite get it to work. My heart was pounding. I froze for a second, then jumped up and shouted, "Hey, who's there?" Silence. Then came a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't answer. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone. I tried calling the front desk. It rang, then clicked to a dead tone. I tried again. Same thing. No answer. I was trapped in that room, with someone or something on the other side of the door. Then I heard a whisper, a low, gravelly whisper, just loud enough to make out. "They never leave." It was right up against the door. My body locked up. Every instinct told me not to respond, not to move. I stood there, barely breathing, until the first light of dawn started to bleed through the curtains. That's when the noise stopped. I didn't even bother to pack properly. I grabbed my bag, tossed everything inside, and rushed downstairs. I wanted answers. At the front desk was a different person, an older man with silver hair and a quiet demeanor. When he saw me, he looked genuinely surprised. "You're checking out already?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, trying to stay calm. "I had a really weird night. Someone was outside my room all night. They tried to get in." His expression darkened. "What room were you in?" 208. He went completely still. "Are you sure?" I showed him my key card. He looked at it, then back at me, visibly unsettled. There shouldn't have been a key issued for that room, he said slowly. That room's been closed since, well, for years now. I asked why, but he shook his head. It was sealed off after a situation. We don't rent it out. There's no record of it being occupied. But your co-worker, she gave me this key. I insisted. He looked even more confused. I was the only one working last night. No one else was here. I just stared at him. I didn't argue. I didn't demand a refund. I just left. Driving away from that place, I felt like I had barely escaped something I still don't understand. I've looked it up online, searched for old news reports, haunted hotel listings, anything. But I've never found a single thing about an incident at that Econo Lodge. But I know what I heard, and every once in a while, when I'm alone in a hotel room, I'll hear faint footsteps in the hallway, slow, steady, and I remember those words whispered through the door. They never leave.